I want to set it a little context. I think it's important. And this is obviously my own personal theory. Chris and I have kind of talked about this behind the scenes in a way, and Skill Up kind of kicks us off. So this isn't a statement of judgment towards Skill Up or anybody, especially around the situation that Activision Blizzard is in. However, what my perspective has always been that you just kind of quiet down enough and things kind of go back to normal, because gamers at their core are about games. But I've been saying for a couple of weeks now, it's like there's going to be a wave of the content creator, like the dilemma that they're in, because the fact that people still want the content that they make and so much. And so I saw these tweets actually from Skill Up, and I thought it was a good, interesting way to kind of start to set up a discussion about it. Like, what is the role of content creation and players, especially around these companies? What ultimately sends the best message? Just to be clear, like, if you feel like it's okay to support Activision Blizzard because there are good devs, there are good people within the company, that's perfectly fine. I'm not making a judgment one way or another. We're just using this as a setup for a discussion. So I'm going to read this. We'll go D, we'll go Chris. We'll see what everybody's feeling in this regards. So Skill Up actually tweeted this out. He says, I'm really struggling with how to cover the Activision Blizzard Ubisoft games. On one hand, boycotts send a clear, unmitigated message. On the other hand, thousands of honest devs slaved away for years to create something only to have that work silenced by the action of these jerk-offs. Personally, I'm inclined to cover these games while also mentioning the context in which that they are made and how the industry needs reform. People will click, oh, cool, new COD, but here, hey, by the way, they're pretty much bad people and bad things happen at Activision, so maybe think about that. I think it's a powerful way on its own, and I really would welcome any advice on this, particularly from developers, since this is your life's work that is being discussed here. And so that's what he kind of tweeted out. I ended up doing my own reply, but I'd like to get, let's start actually with Chris here. I'd like to get Chris's kind of first thoughts, especially as it relates to Activision Blizzard. Is Diablo 2 like, they've already replaced some leadership. We already know that's happened. Diablo 2's on the horizon. Are they almost out of the weeds? Is this something like, are we seeing kind of the tail end of that, essentially that frustration?
I don't think anything is that black and white. I don't think boycotts. I don't think that boycotts send an unmitigated message, because how do they know who stopped paying because they just wanted to play something else, or who stopped paying unless you tell them? Also, to all the people that are upset that are like, well, I've never given Blizzard money, and now as a result, I'm never going to get Blizzard money. How are they receiving that message?
They don't even. That doesn't even not a blitz.
There is no input. You're a non-voting member, and so you are saying, I'm going to continue not voting. All right, well, we're going to keep doing our thing without you then. And so, like, boycotts do not send a clear, unmitigated message unless they are very clearly communicated. And when they are done, they are designed to cut the snake off at the head, regardless of what it does to the whole thing. If you boycott, a major retailer, that hurts the employees who are just showing up to do their job. And you're saying, you know what, that cost is worth the message I'm sending until we see changes in the following way. And so I don't think any of this is that black and white. The money you pay to a game dev is not, I don't get to earmark my $15 a month to Yoshi P and say, I want this only spent on Final Fantasy XIV and only devs who share these following ethical beliefs. It's say, I want to pay $15 for access to your game for 30 days, and you can do whatever the heck you want with that money. That content was already designed and paid for, and so you can use that to pay for future content or pay yourself back for the fact that you paid devs to work on that. You can do whatever you want with that $15 as long as I get my 30 days of access. And so, like, I don't really have that much control. If you disengage from the conversation, then you do not get to remain a part of the conversation. And so what Skill Up is saying here is, okay, if I totally disengage, then people who remain engaged get to drive the narrative. New Diablo is really good without the context. And so by staying in, you get to kind of be that inside man. But you also don't have to live through the pain of living without Diablo. If you really feel strongly, right? Is Diablo so good that you're like, yeah, but like, I really like getting loot though. And that's more important to me than human lives being ruined over this. And that is something you are admitting. Loot is more important to me than those people's issue. I don't care about that. I just want to play my game. And so you're experiencing both of those. It's not that simple. It's an incredibly personal decision. And I think for me, like, the closest parallel I can draw is that I have a tattoo and my brother has a tattoo. And when he was getting his tattoo, I passed along advice to him that was given to me. And it was that if you get a tattoo, never, ever, ever tell anyone what that tattoo means. And that doesn't mean you can't try to explain it, but what it is guard yourself against that response, because people who don't like tattoos will think no matter what your reason is that that's stupid. And there will be people who try to discount that. And when you are doing something as personal as marking your own body permanently, that is because you think that's worth it and no one else's opinion matters. It is your body. You have to live with it. It is your choice. And so if you want to play this game and that's the only thing that matters, then play it. And if you want to boycott it, then boycott it. And if you want to play it and expand context, then play it and expand context. But this is a personal decision. It's like grieving in a way, where there are going to be people who grieve different ways. There are going to be people that say this is a time for those of us in the community that are not jerks to each other to bind together and bind around the Blizzard devs that are not jerks and stick together and play this game that was made by an outside studio and spend time with each other and reminisce on the good times and call for change. There are going to be other people that say, I'm done, and I can't give them another dime ever, no matter what they do. And there are going to be people that say, you know what, this is time for a punishment. And should they make these changes, whatever it is, I would say just internally document what it is. If you want them to make changes, then make a list. Literally write it down if you have to and say, what I would need to see change is I would need to see these 3 names lose their job, and I would need to see this many good patches in a row, and I would need to see these statements from the devs. And when that checklist is complete, just like somebody who has a prison sentence, they've paid their due and go back. You don't get to lord it over them forever. One of the biggest issues I see with things like this is people say, well, I won't play Diablo until, let's say, Ian loses his job because he's in charge of World of Warcraft and I don't like Ian. And I think this whole thing, and if Ian doesn't lose his job, I'm not playing Diablo. And then they hear you, they fire Ian, and you go, yeah, but actually, I'm not going to do this until the new head of Overwatch loses his job. No, you don't get to move the goalpost. So process it, think about how you want to respond, and then just stay the course. And whatever makes Skill Up proud of the work he does is good enough.
What do you think, D?
+1? Yes. That they said. No, it's one of those things where people have that argument of separate the artist from the art, right? I think historically, for example, like the one that I pull off the top of my head is J.K. Rowling. She's been very like trans exclusionary, and so there's been people who are just saying things like, who have said things like, don't talk about Harry Potter ever again, because if you talk about Harry Potter, that means you're like anti-trans. And then there's people who've just said things like, this was a big part of my life before any of this surfaced, and so like the memories that I hold and the kind of attachments I have to this are not attached to the words that this person is like pushed, the narrative that she's pushed. And so tying into what Brian was saying about the whole like you're punishing, boycotting like punishes the wrong people, but on a grand scale of things, in terms of like companies and the way like, you know, things are pushed and how margins are managed, it is the bottom line finance, like what makes the money. So the reason people push boycotts is because the idea that if they see a sudden loss in revenue, if they see a drop in subscribers, this is the way of us telling them like do better, you know. And then when you're seeing that drop in margins, like while we're looking at it as if like Blizzard is suffering, it's not just Blizzard who is suffering, you know. They're the friends who, you know, the team, the GMs who've been like answering all your tickets. They're the people on the websites who've been responding to you, people on the phone calls who've been like answering your phones. And when you're saying things like, you know, boycott it, and it is very like not great, because you are ultimately saying that their suffering is less important than, you know, and very important, like things that have come to light, like other people suffering. So this is why, like, I don't know, like my opinions on boycotts, like at least like on this length is like very like half and half. Like it's not the response anyone wants to hear, but I get it. Like I understand why, but I also, as an empathetic person, like look at it from the people who are kind of like caught in the middle. And I struggle as someone looking at people caught in the middle, being like shrugging and being like, I don't know. Like I watch a lot of like some World of Warcraft players, for example, have come over and started playing Final Fantasy XIV, and they're going through blind prog. I know you're talking about it previously, Chris. Like, but they still also play World of Warcraft. But they're also very firm on their statements, on their stance on like Blizzard itself. You know, tying into what Skill Up said is, do I still produce this content, but make everyone aware of my stance on it? Because if you just drop it and it's just the people who care are no longer part of this conversation, the only people that are left in this conversation are the people who either don't care or like don't like put, you know, the people's sufferings above like their own personal gain. And then when you leave that environment, all you've left are the people like who you don't want to be left alone in like there. So they just like whirlpool, you know, together. So I feel like sometimes it's one of those, you need to, was it bad things happen because good people stand silent? You need to be part of the conversation in their spaces.
Yeah, it's I believe that 100%, especially when you know, like when good people do nothing, that's when like the bad things can just literally just like run rampant. And it's like, oh, you know, and it's a real complex issue, because I think Chris like kind of hit the nail on the head, is that like, A, my money, you know, I don't have any real dictation of where that goes. And then B, the other side of this is that like traditionally we have yet to see a boycott, I guess, bring about the extremes of what people say. Like, I will never do this. Like, Blizzard has burned a handful of people that are vocal, but that's generally the minority. What I think people are seeing through kind of that initial pullback in the numbers, when we see that the daily active users, I think more than anything else, that daily active users is what these companies watch for more than anything. You know, that the money is important, don't get me wrong, but when like that sends a very clear message of, okay, we're gonna pause. We're just gonna pause. We're not gonna burn you to the ground. We're gonna pause. And when we see that happening, that's when we've seen the leadership change over. I think if Blizzard like rebuilds and does right and treats their people right, I think could be a really good story, because like kind of like light is the best disinfectant is a phrase I enjoy. It's like, okay, oh, this is bad, but we need to be keenly aware of it. And that's going to help hopefully drive our decisions. But Chris is 100% right. The decision's 100% personal. If you're just here for the games, that's great. Like, okay, like, you know, that's fine. A lot there, I would say that's the vast majority of people. We're just here for the games. And the Call of Duty numbers this year are most likely going to reflect that very thing. No matter whatever PlayStation pays Activision for whatever feature that they're going to keep locked off of other platforms for a year, which they've done for a few years now, that has no matter, because it's a vocal minority who are going to kind of throw up the most thing. But new leadership that is hopefully going to be bringing the company around. And then essentially, I think they have a lot of work to be done. And their best bet is to deliver good games and put their nose to the grindstone and not mess up. And Blizzard hasn't been able to not mess up for a little while. And that's why I was like, even in the spring before all this, I was like, they've got leadership issues, because it feels like every year there's some big thing where they got to come out and say, we're sorry, we'll do better. We're sorry, we'll do better. And now it's like those people are gone, new people are in place. They get a fresh chance. And I think from the content creation perspective, though, the thing I would see is that, yeah, if SkillUp didn't cover the game, somebody else would step up, because there is an audience that is hungry for that content. They don't care.
Somebody will still Google, is Diablo 2 good? Right now, SkillUp, due to the channel he has built, will show up as one of the top search results, but only if he hits publish.
Yeah.
So, would you hit publish, Brian? Would you cover Diablo 2? And would you play it? Are those different answers?
So, based off of what was occurred, no, I'm not. Like, I think I'm not the biggest Blizzard guy, and I stepped out. And so, honestly, if Diablo 2 is great, that I think that's a point, but that's not okay, I'm back in. I have enough other games that I enjoy to play. I think this conversation's a whole different conversation when, hey, you get like 2 games a year, and one game that you've been excited about since they announced it is Diablo 2 Remastered. It's like, okay, well, but Lost Ark is also like probably like a 2 weeks after that. You know, like, oh, you know, there's plenty of other, I think, great games that I think I can pour myself into that are going to be better worth my time and my money. Now, I am not going to sit here and say that Blizzard can't win me back, but they've got to put the work in, right? Like, I wasn't burned as hard as a lot of people were burned with this deal. I just want to make that very clear. I left in the spring.
The cost of your boycott is,
I wouldn't even consider myself boycotting. I left and was like, all right, I'm out in the spring, like like right as we're getting into March. I was like, yeah, I'm not enjoying this. And I know that there's a lot of love here, and I'm just going to go ahead and just like, I'm going to just bow out now. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to make a stink about it. That's not who I am. I'm out and step out. And then it's like all this stuff happens. It's like Chris was more directly impacted. He's the guy who I was like, I felt bad for. Pyromancer's the guy I felt bad for. Like people who, the fact that you poured in 14 years of your life into WoW, even though like with BFA you left, like how did this news impact you, D?
I think it's one of those things like, it sounds awful, but it's one of those things where, you know how you mentioned earlier, how if you're not giving the money, you not like continuing to play their game doesn't bother them in the slightest. And you're like, well, if you're already not consuming their content, me saying, well, I'm not going to come back, it means nothing to them. They're just like, okay, well, we had 0 and now we still have 0. So like, what do you want from us? I think for me, looking at the game itself, I have more empathy for people whose livelihoods, I guess, are like reliant on this game. Because for me, this game as a whole means like nothing to me. Like I stepped away from it, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, and the content that I create, the things that I consume, has got nothing to do with them. So for me, looking at this, I have like nostalgic memories of World of Warcraft. Does this make me want to play World of Warcraft? Definitely not. Does it make me want to come back? No. Similar to you, like I need to see like good changes, like a reform, a restructure for me to even contemplate being like, will I give this a second chance? But my issues with the game were like way before, any of the stuff that surfaced. Like looking at it now, I don't know. I'm one of those people where I see a lot of my friends who still play World of Warcraft, still stream World of Warcraft, still create content for World of Warcraft, who are like under this scrutiny, something similar to what we were just seeing, where people are like afraid to still be participating in an environment which has now been surrounded by this like cloud of shame, essentially, where just like I have friends who quite literally like appear offline on Discord and things like that because they're like, I don't want anyone to see me like say I'm playing Overwatch, because then what if they think I'm a bad person? Like the fear is like erupted like that far.
Oh my gosh, that concern. Yeah. This ties into what Orville's asking, but finish your thought, because I think go ahead.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? And I think when you have like such a heavy weighted opinion on things like this, people who have no choice to, like, I remember you reacting to that video of Pyromancer, Brian, and you got like super emotional, because it is one of those things where when you invest so much time and your livelihood depends on this, you're essentially having to like put like morality over your own livelihood well-being, and like that is not a conversation anyone else can have. And like you were mentioning earlier, that's a very personal like thing. Like,
and imagine having like people who, not just like your own livelihood, right? But then some of these content creators, like you got like at the end of the day, like I'm sorry, like there's literal bullets I will jump in front of without even thinking about it. I've pre-thought, I've made that decision when those moments happen, and when those moments happen in your life. It doesn't have to be a kid either. Like it could be a partner, it could be just a best friend or something that's like, not even thought. Like I told my wife, if she ever farts in public, I'll just immediately take the blame. Like I'll just be like, oh my bad.
My God, yeah, Brian.
Oh my gosh, Brian, how embarrassing. I just said, don't worry about it. I got you.
I mean, it's also not. There also starts to be a question of like, but does somebody have to take the bullet, right? Can we just step out of the way?